What is going on? What is going on? This is Mike Clark. No excuses. You already know what it is. I have a very great guest. This is actually part two for the guys that tried to tune in yesterday. But Mr. McCoy has definitely accommodated me, and he's allowing me to do this one more time. I promise it's going to be worth it. Let me introduce my guest. I just want to let you guys know that Mr. Marcus McCoy, he's a host of the Real Talk with Marcus McCoy. Uh, Marcus was born and raised in Mississippi, went to the U.S. Army and the PCS, or I guess you would say ETS, from the Fort Bliss, same place your boy did. Same, you know what I'm saying? Had great times, great experiences down in Fort Bliss. So that's how he stayed in El Paso. He's a community leader. He's active in community events, especially in the Black community. He's also a member of a meaningful organization like Omega Sci-Fi Fraternity, Inc., and the NAACP. So once again, I'm very excited for Mr. McCoy to be on here again. I just want to say, hey, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm good. Hey, look, I'm a little under the weather, brother, but we're gonna make it. We're gonna make it pop.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it. Hardest working man in showbiz. I appreciate you coming on. I
No,
really
that's you.
do.
You the hardest working man in show. I'm trying to catch up too.
So we just go jump right into them. Respect your time. So I just want to jump to this first question. So, what are some benefits of building a strong local network within our community, both personally and professionally?
Okay, so for me, I had mentioned previously that my personal and my professional kind of tie into each other. One, let's say for example, I have kids. Some of the times that we build these relationships, I can see the fruits of that labor through my kids, where my kids are getting different opportunities to do things and excel because I've already laid that foundation for them. Also, the other thing is, I feel like um, there are certain things we should be doing as individuals, regardless. We should be networking, and I definitely feel like we should be helping each other in the community. So I feel like you're doing what your purpose to do when you help others and be a blessing to others.
No, you're absolutely right. Because the new saying with the young kids and a lot of people in general is that they just don't want to talk to a stranger, don't want to network with people. They want to say, well, no new friends. But I promise you, if you make those handshakes, you open up, you'll be surprised at what you're going to gain. Like I said, me and Mr. McCoy, we contacted over the phone, and look at us now, man. It just the connection is immediate. So you have to open yourself up to just being vulnerable and learning from other individuals and not being just so closed minded all the time. I definitely hate that with our community. It's not all the way bad with our community, but I've definitely noticed that trend that a lot of people just refuse to just let go of those 10-year-old friends or the friends they know aren't the best for them and just developing and growing.
Oh, I say something about that?
Yeah.
You made a very interesting point. Is like you said, it's not bad in our community, but I mean, how many of us have, I use myself as an example. So I got some friends from back in the day that's in Mississippi, and they're still doing the things they were doing 20 years ago. And if you hold on to that, right, we always trying to, all of us are, I think to some degree, are trying to progress to get to a certain level, but then we'll complain when we can't reach that plateau. But you got to think about the things that are holding you back. Could be friends, it could be some of your personal habits, things of that nature. So I just wanted to kind of piggyback off what you were saying.
No, you're exactly right. So I'm gonna go into the next one is so with that being said, how can individuals effectively engage with our community to build strong network relationships?
I think the first thing is you got to actually be committed to it. um, People kind of tend to dive into something at first, and it might be a new wave, and they're excited at first, right? But
Yeah.
then when it does not go the way they wanted to go, or maybe they don't get the people on board they expected, then they kind of tend to shy away. Definitely got to be committed. I think you got to have a goal in mind too. Like, obviously, like I'm gonna use a military term, a 50-meter target. So what's right in front of you, but then I feel like you got to have a long-term goal as well. And I feel like if you set those parameters and you stick to them, which is probably the hardest part about all of it, is sticking to what you're supposed to be doing. Then I think you can just foster relationships, and on top of it, I never like to say you try to look at the benefits of doing something, but let's be real. Nobody does anything without some type of expectation or end goal in mind, right?
Exactly.
So I figure you take all those aspects and you put them together, and then I mean you could build a strong network, but just you got to stay the course.
Exactly. Because, some people might hear what we're talking about and think, well, I'm just going to network. And what is networking? Oh, I'm just going to say, hi, how are you doing? Or, you know, they might see them actually benefiting or excelling in life and saying, well, how can I gain something from that person when they really need to take a step back and understand, well, how can I establish some sort of value for that individual? How can I, add to that person? And of course, in return, you're going to get something back eventually, but you have to go in there with the mindset of, you may not gain anything from this,
Hmm.
but you're open to it. And I think that's exactly what you're saying to it. So, for the individuals who do find this difficult, I would say, of course, out of all generations, we have the best piece of equipment ever is the internet. So that's why I want to go ahead and roll into is, what role do digital tools and social media platforms play in building local networks and connections, and how can they be used effectively?
Oh man, great question. Social media, man, it is, man, like we talked about earlier. You could have your face somewhere else in a matter of seconds or minutes. Um, Especially like with YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I use these platforms quite often. I'm gonna give you an example of like the using the social media tools. So I was at a conference in Atlanta, right? Now, I mean, I come from the era we still use like regular business cards, right? But
Yep.
that's a little outdated depending on the audience you're trying to deal with. So I got this business card, right, with my all my information on it. I think it's cool, right? I'm like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna pass it out. And so I give it to this guy, and he said, hey man, they ain't gonna do nothing but take that card and probably just throw it away. He was like, why don't you get a digital business card, right? So he put me on game. And I mean, they got a bunch of apps with the digital business card. So you go on there, you put in all your information, and you scan it. And the same thing, people are big on these QR codes, right?
Yep.
You scan the QR code, and everything you need to know about me professionally, whether it come to what I'm doing in the community, my social media handles, all that type of stuff, it just popped up. And I was kind of like, man, that's crazy that we got the ability to have something like this. It almost reminds me, I'm gonna use something that's probably not the right analogy, but it almost kind of reminds me of where we came from. You remember back in the day, if you were gonna read a book, you had to actually go to the library and
Yeah.
check it
Yeah.
out, and then you had to actually physically read the book. Now you could just, hey, digitally, or you can get on Kindle and you can find the answer you're looking for without having to do any work. It's the same thing with networking, via social media. I
No,
mean,
no, no, you're exactly right. I mean, I would say with the internet, with digital anything, is like we need to understand what those tools were developed for. First off, the military started all of this with the internet,
mm-hmm,
so it was used for the military at first. Then of course, intellectuals, people who are scholars, they end up using it, and then it got passed down to the rest of the population. But if you go back to the original premise of what this is for and what you're supposed to gain from this, that's exactly right. Understanding that this is to reach many, many, many people. You go from having a physical card where you can only give one or two people locally to having a digital, business card, and now you post it to your Facebook, post it to LinkedIn, whatever, and everybody across the world can see you. Anybody that hits that friend request, like it's just at this point we have no excuse to not network with each other.
yeah, I was on this. I gotta say this. So digital marketing, my personal opinion is like it's the here and now, like period.
Yep.
I know people do still get out face to face and hand out information about their business or whatever, but digital marketing is the way to go. I was in this it was a called Big Innovations. It was a marketing summit, right? And man, like just the different tools and the platforms that they were putting out there. And I mean, like day by day, I think the workshop was like 3 or 4 days. And man, you got like hundreds of thousands of people like in that profession telling the people like the fastest ways to do this. Like they even got different like nonprofit places that'll literally promote your business for you without even having to pay them anything up front. You know what
Wow.
I'm saying? So I feel like it's one of the things, like say like you're just starting out, right? And you don't really know how you want to market your platform or whatever product you're trying to sell. Like you could go to one of these umbrellas and they'll get you started, and then you kind of figure out the game and you could just pick up traction from there.
Wow. No, you're exactly right. And you spoke about something that I want to go ahead and segue into next. And said that you go to summits. I also know that you personally actually develop and curate different spaces to talk about complex issues, complex problems. You're invited to many different platforms, and I want people to understand this too, because that's the power of networking as well. And then also, what are you going to do with that network, and how are you going to market it out? And I just love the way you do it specifically because I mean, you only got so much time in a day, but every time, even the short time I've talked to you, hey, I'm doing this. I'm coming out of town from doing some event over here. I'm putting this together. I'm putting this together, and I want people to understand, basically, how do you go about actually curating the space, bringing people together, and talking about complex issues, especially with the Black community, where we may not be exposed to summits or different social events such as a summit.
Okay. So for me, I'm gonna use my show as an example. So say like anytime I get ready to have somebody on the show, we always, whether it's one guest, two guests, how many guests it is, we always have like a conversation at least maybe like 2 weeks before we actually get to the show. So first of all, you can understand, what it is or where I'm trying to go with the conversation. But I got to make sure that you're on board with the conversation as well, because it's nothing like getting on there and we just ain't vibing. It makes for a very dull conversation, and people see when something's not organic, right?
Right.
For us, I think too, one of the things I try to do is I try to pick somebody that is either uh more educated than me in this particular field, because I like to bring people that I would consider to be a subject matter expert in it. So basically, I'm just sitting back and I'm just moderating. Like you're gonna do the majority of the talking, but I have some key points that's gonna bring that conversation out. Um, the other thing is, I think you gotta. I think a big part of it is too is I try to, when I pick these guests, or I pick people to try to, or I select people to try to be on my platform. I try to find somebody who I have a natural or type of dialogue with, or we're not trying to strain like the conversation. Like me and you, prime example, right? So we talked on the phone. First time we was on the phone for like an hour,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we know each other from a can of paint, but you could tell that we had the same type of ambition, same type of upbringing. So it makes the conversation a lot easier to have when you already got that connection and it's organic with a person.
No, you're exactly right. And um, you know, I didn't know a lot about moderation. I didn't or moderating. Um, I was never in that space, especially because I did skip college, and a lot of this stuff. Now that I'm back into college and I'm really starting to understand the space, like a lot of this is revolves around that. Curating those spaces, moderating conversations, especially with intellectuals who are subject matter experts. Because everybody has strong opinions. Everybody has what they think is right and what they think is wrong, and that's what you bring to the table. Like you said, whether they're smarter than you or not, you understand how the conversation needs to be had. Whether it's negative or positive, but you find that balance in between it. So that would bring me to my next question. Will be, how do you prepare for moderating complex conversations around the Black community? You don't necessarily have to be a Black community, but how do you go about preparing for any complex conversation, and what challenges have you faced in this role?
So I would say when I consider myself to be like real studious, right? I tell everybody, man, when I put these glasses on, man, I'm on Malcolm X time by any means necessary. but but I don't know. I do a lot of reading on the subject. I think sometimes people see us and we come on this, on a podcast or whatever platform, they think we just get on here and then we just randomly talk. And I know it's the same with you. Like I know you do your homework ahead of time. Like me and you, we both studied each other's show before we ever had a show together.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that's part of being educated, being well rounded. I think for the guests, again, it's an educational piece on my side from them too. But I try to when I try to make sure I'm not going to be offensive when I'm having a complex conversation. I always ask myself, is the like the content, because you know what I mean, you talked about this too. Like viewership is great, all that stuff is great, but the content is the most important thing. A lot of times people put out content that's not really uh it's not gonna be really helpful to anybody. It's just a bunch of talking back and forth, and or they're using maybe stuff that's controversial. So I don't get down like that.
Yeah.
I just want to have real conversation, and I try to, tell the people that I'm gonna have, or even when I go to when if somebody reached out to me, to ask me to be on a panel or something like that, right? I make sure that that panel is probably it has to be in line with my values and who I'm as a person, so that way I don't get caught up in something that I really don't want to be a part of. Because branding is a big thing too,
Yes.
and you could be hot today and then do something tomorrow, or be a part of the wrong like show, or even like a panel, and then it can completely change the outlook of what your branding looks like. So I think just staying on task, and like I said, being trying my best not to be offensive, but I'm not naturally offensive anyway, so that's not like a real big thing. But just seeing, hey, look, is this topic, is this something that's gonna engage people to have a meaningful conversation? If it's not, probably 9 out of 10, I'm not gonna mess with it.
No, you're exactly right, because it's for most individuals, it's that viral moment is what they're trying to catch. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I've noticed the most is like I said, going back to just college and seeing how structured it is, military, how structured it is. It's the same thing you need to do with your podcast. Same thing you need to do with anything in life is be organized, formatted. Just like you said, before you even came on, and before we knew each other as a can of paint or whatever, when we put the schedule together, first thing I did was studied you, went through your YouTube channel, went through all your content, seeing where, what could we talk about, talking points, and then I structured, my interview from there. But like you said, a lot of individuals, what they'll do is they'll create a podcast and then they'll just get on like how we are now, and they're just talking, and then eventually it goes off the rails, and now you're talking about something you didn't want to talk about, and then
Mm-hmm.
you might end up finding out you might have opposite viewpoints about an issue, and now that's what that viral moment is. So and you're right. At the end of the day, the premise is, what are we getting from it? We're not getting anything from this, because it's just it's just a random conversation and not focused. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what it needs to be. It just needs to be focused. So I would say, what are the most important considerations when moderating conversation? I know we probably hit some of them, but I mean, what are the most important considerations when you're moderating on sensitive topics like race, diversity, financials, whatever?
I would say, let me see, most. Mm, I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Is I think for me, again, it's about the content, but then like you can't always. I don't feel like you can always shy away from a complex conversation because you're worried about how it's going to affect maybe a certain demographic. Now, you want to be sensitive to the demographic, right? Um, like we had a thing about we during Black History Month, right? Which I kind of always talk about. I hate the fact that we got the shortest month, but for me, Black History is it's 365 days a year. It's every day is Black History, and so yeah, I found myself like in a space where we had a show where we had two shows in February. We had one where we had the women that came on there to talk about Black history and their experience, and also the men. And one thing I thought about as we were coming up with the show is like, all right, well, like how is this gonna excuse me, how's this gonna this conversation gonna be play out, right? Am I solely targeting just the Black demographic? Because at the end of the day, other people play a part in what has happened in our history as a people too. So I'm not trying to alienate them, but I also feel like sometimes we get caught up in just trying to make sure we appease everybody instead of just getting the message out there. So I feel like what I try to do is I try to cut through all of that. I say, all right, so look, ultimately, what is my goal? My For that particular time, my goal is Black History Month. So I want to highlight Black people, point blank, period. No disrespect to nobody else, but that's what I want to do for Black History Month. Um, so I think when you figure out exactly what it is that you're trying to do, then you can start taking all those other layers away. Like what are people going to say? Is it predominantly black? Oh, well, we're alienating this culture, this race. I think once you put it in perspective and say, hey, look, this is my target point. And a lot of times for me, it's not really about like an audience. It's just about the topic. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I've had, one of my friends, name giving a shout out, named Araceli. She's been on the show twice. She's Hispanic, right? And I definitely plan to have, other races on there. But again, for me, it's all derivative of what we're talking about. And it could be an alien, for lack of better terms. If the alien is the best person to talk about the particular topic that I want to hit on, and that's what I'm going with. So I just try to stay focused on the topic, and then it helps me take all those other variables away.
Yeah, I definitely understand that, and I appreciate that point because that's what most people get hung up on is who's listening and not the message.
Mm-hmm.
So you already established this is what we're talking about. It's not saying I'm alienating or trying to say one conversation is more important than the next conversation. I mean, you can only have so many conversations in an hour. You can only break so many topics up in an hour,
Facts.
2 hours, whatever you got. So you got to hit those points, and it doesn't mean that, hey, what we don't talk about today, we're not going to talk about a week from now or a month from now.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to get an opportunity to have these discussions, So, I mean, that's the most important thing is just the discussions are being had. And that's one thing, reason I wanted you to come on is because a lot of the viewers that I have, people that actually listen and follow me, is like, you have to understand, expose yourself to conversations, whether you agree with talking points or you don't. Just open your mind to the conversation, gain what you can from it, and then just move on. But what we see now, at least in society, is like nobody can have an opinion. I remember growing up, and we always had that conversation. Your parents would always say, "Don't talk about religion, don't talk about politics, don't
Mm-hmm.
talk about I think sex." And then now look, we're all having those conversations, and of course, it offends this person, it offends that person. So now I understand why it was so important to kind of keep it. Don't push your opinion out, but sometimes it needs to be said. Sometimes it needs to be said, but it's just how we react to the conversation is what
Yeah.
I don't like.
But at the end of the day, too, I just feel like people respect what's real. You know what I'm saying? You might not like it, right? But you always got to respect that somebody's being like 100% organic and real with you. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that is like the type of narrative that I'm always trying to push. Like if you see me tomorrow, and I feel like people are complex, and like you said, like back in the day, the parents told us not to talk about these sensitive topics. But if you look at it now, like social media has gave me, you, and everybody else a platform to basically be able to talk about whatever we want to talk about. It just depends on if the people that's watching, if they rock with it. I also got to say this too. Hey, this is much different for me being on this side of it versus being on the other side of it.
Watch you.
But I'm liking it though. It's cool. I'm feeling it.
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. You knocking them out the park. And so, because like I said, you deal with a lot of panels, a lot of different venues and setups, and curating conversations. So I know you have good venues and good situations, and then you also have the bad. So how do you balance the need for honest, open conversations with the need to create a safe and respectful environment at the same time with your participants?
So I'm always gonna be me, regardless. Like it, love it, hate it. I'm gonna be Marcus. That's the only person I know how to be. But I also realized that, once you get in certain spaces, like you don't necessarily control. You control what you say, right? But you don't control what the content is going to be once you allow yourself to become a participant on somebody else's show or platform. Because I mean, in the end of the day, they're controlling the narrative, even like with a panel. But I just try to be, I always try to be honest and candid about how I feel about it. But I also realize, like, I'm gonna use this phrase, code switching. Right? I talked about this on another show. Code switching, people do it all the time,
All the time.
right? You're not this when you go to work. You're not the same person when you with your homeboys, your old lady, whatever the case may be. You're not the same, right? But I also, over time, And I think, or you probably could test this too from being in the military. Like it taught us how to be so adaptive depending on the situation.
Yeah.
So I feel like I could go in any room, any space, where they're extremely educated or maybe not as educated. And I feel like I could go and I could be in that conversation. And I'm gonna give you an example of what I'm saying. This happened to me last January. So I also work with this platform. It's called Black El Paso Voice. So I'm giving a shout out to Black El Paso Voice. Hey Monica, I love you. Hey, you doing your thing. But we have Black El Paso News. So we got this big migrant crisis here in El Paso, right?
Yes.
So the President Biden came here in January to address local leaders and city councils and stuff like that to talk about what's going on, right? Bro, I cannot make this up. I was the only person of color, and when I say of color, I mean black, that was there provide media coverage. I literally watched the president land on the tarmac, get off the plane. People were trying to ask questions, and we got to see Governor Greg Abbott, but we don't get to be. And at first, I kind of felt I was like, oh man, like I'm the only black dude. It's a little weird, right? You got these major networks, CNN and CBS and all this type of stuff, and we're a local, predominantly black, news outlet, right? So at first, it was kind of like, man, it's a little weird, but then at the same time, I'm like, hey man, this is where I'm supposed to be, because without somebody else creating that opportunity for me, I'm not there, and somebody else gets to do that story, and we're nowhere involved. So I think, man, we got to take advantage of the opportunities we have too, man. It's nothing like opportunities, and when it knocks, I mean, you got to be there to answer, and you got to open the door.
No, you're exactly right. And like you said, that example is the reason why I do what I do, and I appreciate what you do, because like you said, if you don't do it and you're the only one there, then that means nobody's there. At least you're representing our community by just being there and saying, hey, look, we're also here. You're speaking for us. You're making sure what's going on, because those platforms, yeah, they're marketed to a certain demographic. Maybe they're explaining a certain way to that demographic, how they understand it, but you know how to market to your demographic and who is listening to your actual network. So when you're creating these panels, when you're bringing these spaces together, because I want to leave off on this statement is, or this question basically is, maybe you give me an example, because this is what I want to understand is, what is, how do I want to say it? Can you give me an example of how a particular topic, say you had a particular topic, and the end of it happened, somebody might have been upset, frustrated, or whatever, but they might have stayed to the very end just to speak to you and say, hey, I appreciate hearing this conversation, because sometimes it's very tough to hear conversations that you have opposing viewpoints to. And I can understand, because I've been in some of those rooms. I've been where I think they had a race for one of the Senate seats, and I don't know, the senators who were running, they were down at the UTEP stadium. I mean, the UTEP college. I heard one person from the Democratic side, one person from the Senate, and from the Republican side, and I didn't like either one, and I didn't like the talking points, but I did leave with something. I did leave with something, and I actually got to speak to a couple of them prior to leaving, because everybody rushed them once the actual event was over. Because I've noticed that most people might be upset, frustrated, mad at the moment, but once the event's over, you see those same people rushing and saying, you know what, I appreciate you bringing this conversation to us. It's hard to hear, but I heard it. Have you ever had any of those stories?
Yeah, I actually was on a Black History panel at EP at El Paso Community College, and I mean, I'm not gonna lie, they were asking the panel was asked some kind of tough but yet controversial but questions, but I mean, they was like real questions. Like one of the questions we were asked is, do we feel like in El Paso that the Black community is being recognized or have like the same outlet that the Hispanic community has? And I said no. Right now, El Paso predominantly Hispanic, so that's probably not a popular thing to say. But I also feel like I'm not me if I don't say how I truly feel about an issue like that, right? Then I feel like I'm being fake, and that's something I'm not gonna do. So literally after the show, it was some students. It was crazy too because I didn't really expect anybody to be there waiting, to talk afterwards. And one of the students came to me and they was like, you know what? I didn't agree. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but I respect it. So they end up asking me, like, well, what are some things you think we could do in our community to bridge the gap to make, Black people feel more included? And man, we had like a 20-30 minute conversation about that. And then but I also too, like I know a lot of times, and there's been it could go another way, but I feel like you got to understand how sometimes they agree to disagree too. Because I don't agree with everybody. I mean, I don't agree with my parents sometimes, but they're my parents. And we just gotta agree to disagree. But that was really dope because I felt like I affected them in a way that maybe they or gave them some kind of thinking point that or perspective that they maybe never thought of before, right? It's different when you're in a place and you the minority. I mean, versus the majority. I mean, the minority versus the majority. Like in El Paso, Hispanic people will probably always be the majority. So they don't necessarily not everybody, but they might not have the same struggles that the minority group of people have. And it was just cool to see them, actually toward the end because they was asking questions, they was giving a little, they was kind of butting heads with us a little bit. But at the end, it was cool to see them give that feedback where we just all came to an understanding, and they were like, okay, I understand, I grasp now why you think the way you think, and it's valid.
And I want to leave it right there because, like I said, that was exactly what I wanted to hear. Is because a lot of people, when they go to conversation, or maybe they see a flyer, or maybe they see something on their Facebook, something about a controversial topic that they already have some preconceived notion about, and they're like, I'm just not going to like it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to hear it. But you hear these tough conversations, even in the Black community, when we talk about reparations, we talk about what the community needs. You know, we all got this preconceived notion, but once the topic is over with, once the conversation is over with, you got a little bit more to take with you, and then at the end of it, you have a discussion. If time allots, and if the speaker's still going to speak with you, but that right there was a cool point right there, definitely. So I want to roll right into our final topic that I wanted to hit on, and that's mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't understand how powerful a mentor is fully, and what it can do. Not only that, maybe you don't have a mentor, but maybe you're achieving and doing great things in life. Maybe you know, we, we everybody's a success in their own right, and we all, I wouldn't say we all, but majority of people say, well, I wish I was taught this as a child. I wish somebody showed me this. I wish somebody showed me that. But when are we going to stop saying that and pass it on to someone else? Not pass it on to someone else, but say, look, I'm gonna be a solution. I'm one person out of 8 billion people, but I do it, and someone else might do it, someone else might do it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what role do mentors play in helping young people navigate the challenges and opportunities of their educational journey, or just adulthood in general?
Oh man, mentors play a huge role. And I know me and you talked about this, so I got to say this so it kind of be a segue into. So I'm very, very passionate about youth mentorship. I actually serve as the Fatherhood Initiative chairman for the Sigma Tau chapter of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and and it's not just black kids or white kids, Hispanic kids, white kids. All kids need mentorship. Period. I think about some of the things or some of the pitfalls I have avoided just because I had a mentor. Now, my dad wholeheartedly was my mentor, straight up, still is my mentor. Still can, and when I think about mentorship, I'm thinking about like for the totality of your lifetime. So I might have started, mentoring you or mentoring a person when you're young, right? But what you hope is that mentorship is over a lifetime. Where hey, look, I got you when you were a child, and now you're grown up, and I'm still. Because I mean, I call my dad for advice all the time. It's it's nothing like being able to call somebody who's or be able to have that dialect with somebody who's already been where you're at. You know what I'm saying? That like I feel like that's the key. And what happens is a lot of times is, and I was kind of like this as a kid, so I was a little hard headed, right? So
Yeah.
you feel like you know everything, right? But you don't. You're still a child. And a lot of times, kids are not receptive to that mentorship. But man, like mentorship can basically guide your life. Like I think about what you're doing, right? When you talk about building, you talk about financial literacy and building wealth and trying to gain or acquire assets, right? That's something that we don't talk about as a people in general. I don't ever remember having a conversation when I was little about financial literacy. You know what I'm saying? So even that is a part of mentorship, is just educating younger people on, like, if you're gonna do this, look, you need, these are the steps to get there. And I just think, man, like mentorship, it could go a extremely long way.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, for the youth, they need to understand. And like you said, I was hard headed when I was younger, but I definitely wasn't to the point where I was closed off from hearing input, advice, And we talked about this as well before we got on the podcast. It's just being exposed to certain things that we wouldn't be exposed to necessarily in our own household. You know,
Mm-hmm.
how cool would it have been for, I may not, my parents might not agree with it, or they might not be, volunteering or signing the permission slip for it, but maybe they would have anyway, and it would have sent me to the space station, and I got exposed to NASA, and then I could become a, aerospace engineer, or they sent me down to go see NASCAR race. It just
Mm-hmm.
things that you're exposed to at an early age would benefit you greatly in your adulthood. We talked
Absolutely.
about it earlier. It's like I've been exposed to more things in my 30s than I was when I was 15 years old, 14 years old. You know, it's like as a kid, you're told you could dream big, dream, dream, dream. The moment you hit 18, it's like you don't dream no more. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you just focus on one thing because you haven't been exposed to nothing from those dreams. Because that's just what it is at the end of the day. Something that doesn't seem real at all because you haven't physically seen it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would say with mentorship and exposure. So I would say that the way to bridge that gap, the way I would think to bridge that gap is schools. So I
Mm-hmm.
would bring it to you here is how can schools or other educational institutions collaborate with mentorship programs? Like I know you said your chapter, your sorority, I mean fraternity. I'm sorry. They
Good.
they also do things within the schools. So I don't know if you want to talk about that as well.
Absolutely. So I think the first thing is both parties had to be on board. Like you can't have the school be all in and then the other party be 10% in. Like it has to be a collective effort, right? There has to be some clear dialect on what the goal of the program is in its totality. Not a piece of it, not what we're gonna do tomorrow. There has to be that scope. Um, so like I was telling you earlier, so at my so there's this thing called Read Across America. It happens every year. It's a national program. So what my chapter did was we also have a Sauter on literacy that's a part of Omega Psi Phi as a whole. So it's one of the programs we have, right? So all we did was we already had people that were tapped into different schools here in El Paso, right? Some of them have kids, some of them work there. So we say, well, hey, look, we got reader, we got a Sauter on literacy. What can we use that the school already deals with, right? To come and do our part. And so we just took Read Across America at the school called Western Hills Elementary. And for 3 years now, we've been going in and reading to the kids every year around that time. But in that same token, because now we've been doing that these past 3 years, it goes back to the networking piece that you keep alluding to. Now we've built that relationship with that school, so they know every year
Yeah.
when Read Across America comes, they're gonna get a call, probably from me or somebody else in my organization, saying, "Hey, look, we want to come and read to those kids." But I think the big thing is just everybody has to be all in, and there can't be any like and I use this analogy the other day where I was saying about Michael Jordan. I'm a big sports fan, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And Michael Jordan's the GOAT. Let me just say that for everybody listening, it's no debate. I know it's random, but some people like everybody has to have clear identified roles. Somebody's gonna be Jordan, somebody's gonna be Pippen, somebody's gonna be Luke Longley, somebody's gonna be Tony Kukoc, somebody's gonna be Bill Cartwright. Everybody cannot be the leader. And if you structure your what you're trying to do, the organizational structure, if you got those clear, identifiable, laid out roles, and it just makes the process go so much smoother. Because if me and you work together and you don't know what you're doing, you might mess around and do what I'm supposed to be doing because you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And I feel like it takes a lot of miscommunication issues away as well.
No, you're right. Yeah, I mean, mentorship is a big thing. So I would ask you, so for someone who wanted to do what you're doing, whether it's to go to school to read to the children, or maybe they have a program in mind that they want to do, because there's a lot of parents that say, well, I wish the schools would teach this and the schools would teach that, but I know there has to be some sort of protocol or system, or something in place where you could introduce this to the school corporation. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So I would say it goes back to relationship. I was only able to do that at Western Hills because my kids were attending school. So, it starts by, having a conversation with the teachers, the principals, people that are a part of the faculty. Even like, going to like PTA meetings, which, I mean, you don't see, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I don't think you see a whole lot of dads at PTA meetings, right?
No.
But believe it or not, a lot of decisions that are made in the school are made at those PTA meetings. And if you go to meetings like that, it gives you unlimited access to know what's going on in school. Like those PTA meetings, they create fundraisers. A lot of times, they sell T-shirts, and it's just about getting out there and having those conversations with the individuals who can, point you in the right direction, or even, in charge of it. But I definitely say before you even get to that point, though, you need to have a plan, like a full laid out plan, right? Because we live in a day and age, if you come halfway and you don't know what it is you're trying to do, most people are probably going to turn you away and say, hey, you know what, I'm cool. I'm not sure that we're trying to mess with that. Because it also shows when you don't come with a plan, it makes you look like you're not serious about the event, or whatever the thing is that you're trying to do. So I say, have a plan, have it laid out, and do some, again, goes back to being studious. Do some research. Most things in this life that a person wants to do when it comes to a program, there's already somebody who has did it or done it somewhere else. So all you got to do really is you take that blueprint and you tailor it. You might have to change it a little bit to fit the scope of what you're doing. And then you come in from an educated viewpoint, and then you introduce it to the people who had the ability to make it happen.
I want to leave this example because what you said was key, and it just reminded me of something. And I want to give, like I said, a lot of people ask me, why do you stay in El Paso, Texas? Why, but I love it there. I love it. I love the community. I love everybody around. It
Me
is
too.
predominantly, what I'm saying? It's predominantly Hispanic, but I love the community there. And the reason I brought it up was going back to, we don't go to the PTA events, right? PTA meetings. I'm big in real estate development. I'm big in, home ownership, a lot of things within the community, but it doesn't have to do with the PTA necessarily, but the city council meetings. And I see a huge difference between how El Paso city meetings are ran compared to my hometown, which is in South Bend, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see artists virtually. I mean, since COVID, everything is virtual now. I mean, you can even see court cases virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And you could also participate virtually, so there's no more excuses of, well, I didn't participate because I got to be there physically. No, you can actually be on a live, discussing meetings, discussing topics. But what I was trying to get at was, in El Paso, when there's a meeting, when there's an issue with a neighborhood or a community or whatever, even with the migrating issue, there is over 40, 50, 60, almost 100 people at those city council meetings. And the mayor and all the city council members have to hear each person talk for 3 minutes straight.
Mm-hmm.
You can only imagine how long that's going to be.
Yeah.
And they're there for like 5, 6, 7 hours listening to everyone, not cutting no one off, right? Because they are important topics. But then when I go to South Bend, to my home, where I was born and raised, a lot of the things that are changing the community, a lot of the things where the funding isn't sent to my neighborhood, but it's sent to the more richer neighborhoods, no one's there. there's literally like maybe 4 or 5 people there, you know, and for the more wealthier neighborhoods, they have one person who just speaks for everybody, and they get all the laws passed for them. So I say that to say this is that we need to understand too is when laws are being put in place, when changes are happening at schools, when organizations are being part of schools, we need to understand if you didn't show up, you need to understand somebody did show up. And
Hmm.
their voice was heard compared to your voice, you know?
But that goes back to the ownership, right? We don't, you know what I'm saying? Now I'm talking about black people again. Like as a whole, right? Hey, we don't do a good job of taking ownership in our own communities and things of that nature. You know, I feel like from what you explained, the difference probably in your hometown versus what's going on in El Paso is the citizens here, they're gonna make sure, even if it's the most minute topic or subject ever, they're
They're
gonna
showing
make
out.
it, they're gonna make sure, hey, look, man, you heard me. And I think, you know, it's a level of commitment that sometimes we don't have in the spaces or the places we live in from like the people that's gonna affect. We also kind of fall into this mentality where, oh well, well, it's kind of like almost like voting too. You ever meet people and they be like, are you like, oh man, you gonna vote? And I'm like, oh no, man, my one little vote ain't gonna do nothing. But it's that way of thinking that continues to pull us back and hold us back, is because we don't want to take ownership and actually put the work in. You can't, like, you might go to city council one time, it might not have any effect, right? But this is the long game, and that's how I look at everything.
Yeah.
It's not a sprint; it's a marathon. Everything I'm in right now, everything we do is the long game. Like, and you got to think of it that way. You might not have an immediate impact, but over time, you could have an impact. But it's also about, again, goes back to network. You got to build. I look at everything I do as I'm trying to build. Like, I have like a team, right? So my podcast, I got, different people that do different things with my podcast, and we're a team, right? And the team, one of the things about team is there's no I in it, and everybody has to buy into that. And once you buy into it and nobody deviates from what the plan is, then over time, I might not even be the person that makes this whole thing go. But somebody on the team might say something different, and it might resonate with the people that we're trying to get it to.
No, exactly. And so I know that I said that was going to be the last part, but there's one more part I do want to hit because we keep, and like I said, I've been talking about it for a while now. It's just networking, and I know you're part of many, many organizations, and I want to just touch on that very, very briefly before I let you go. And I just want people to understand. Could you just let them know what organizations you are part of currently at the moment?
Okay, so I am a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Also a member of the local branch of the NAACP here. I'm also on the McCall Center Board of Directors, and I just recently started this initiative called Success Beyond College. And basically, what Success Beyond College is we're trying to have candid conversations beyond the classroom that are gonna foster an environment for our young adults to come out of college better prepared.
And so, what made you want to be a part of those organizations?
I think growing up, my parents are like a big influence. So my dad is actually my fraternal brother. He's a member of Omega Psi Phi fraternity as well. And I got to see a lot of the things they did in the community. And I think, like most kids, if your dad is or your father is a positive influence, you're gonna kind of naturally, I guess, like want to go down the same path or mimic some of these things. And so I just saw at a young age the power of being in the community and being an advocate for change. My dad was also a cop too, so you know, alongside the fraternal, his fraternal activities, I got to see. My dad became a cop because in Jackson, Mississippi, he felt like black people didn't have representation on the police force, and he didn't like some of the things that were going on in our communities. So he decided to take ownership. And I think for me, that is, I live here, but I felt like I wasn't making as great of an impact as I could based on my skill set and my talents. And I saw a need for change, so I said, what's one way I could create that change? And being in these organizations, I'm not gonna lie, man, it gives you like a different type of platform that you don't necessarily have otherwise. It has opened doors for me that were before were closed. um so I think, like, prime example, we as an organization, and when I'm saying an organization, I mean Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. Man, we have some of the most intelligent and successful businessmen and brothers across the globe. And because now, what I'm saying, they're in those spaces, they're able to affect change. And I wanted to be in a space where I could affect change. I mean, a lot of things I've been able to do so far in this life are based off the networking capabilities I've had to be a part of these great organizations. But the thing about I want to make sure I say about these organizations is they were all created in a time where black people or people of color, however you want to frame it, did not have a voice. So these people had the foresight to understand that, hey, look, again, as I was saying about being the long game, that in the future, if we're going to be successful, we need to create these barriers, these social networks for change, and all these other different apparatuses so we can be successful. So I think for me, I just wanted to get involved and stay involved. And then, I mean, some of it is about legacy too, right? I care about the legacy I leave behind. I'm big on that. Like when it's all said and done for me, I want my family, especially my children, to be able to say, man, you know what, man? Because this is how I feel about my dad. I want to be like, you know what, man, my dad, he was out there. He really was fighting, or you know, speaking out against things that were wrong and trying to make a positive impact. My dad, like for me, is like my guy. And I tell him all the time, I say, kids don't say this in reverse, but I always tell my dad like how proud I am of him because he never allows himself to get satisfied. And I'm kind of like that too. Like I'll do one thing and I'm like, okay, that was great and it was cool. I got to do that, but what am I gonna do to further the cause and move the push the narrative forward?
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, your dad's doing great things. I promise you, because that's the same. Like you said, if you're exposed to things through your dad or your father, your mother, um, you kind of like gravitate towards that. Same thing
Mm-hmm.
with my dad. I joined the military because of him. There's a
Right, right.
lot of things that even me going back to school, my mother, there's things that you can gravitate, you take from either party. So I appreciate that. And then I want to hit you with this. I think I got a couple more questions, but this is my second to last. Is for the youth, for individuals that aren't part of organizations. You know, what do you recommend for them to do, or finding good, positive organization to be a part of? How would they go about doing something like that?
Well, we already talked about the internet, man. You could literally probably Google anything. But I will say this. I feel like you don't necessarily have to be a part of an organization to do what you're supposed to be doing in the community. I want to make sure I say that because there are people in El Paso and surrounding areas and different cities that I know that not are that they don't belong to any of these what we consider to be like prominent organizations, right? Um, but for a person who does want to be part of an organization, I mean, you could get on, you can get online, you can Google. Like if you wanted to look at my branch of the NAACP right now, you could go on Google and type in NAACP and type in El Paso, and it'll show you the two branches that are here. It's the same thing with Omega Psi Phi. You could type in Omega Psi Phi, you could type in El Paso, and 9 out of 10, it'll show you. I think the thing is you got to figure out what it is you want to do first.
Yeah.
What is your talent and what are your resources like? Once you figure that out, then I think it'll be an easier transition to find the organization that you match up with well. There's a big brother, big sister here in El Paso. I mean, there's a gang of you got the Leemore home. There's so many different places that a person could. And then the other thing is, let's say you might not necessarily want to be a part of an organization off the bat, right? You can also just go volunteer, right? Volunteering gives you the access to be able to do the good work without actually having to have a commitment right up front. Because once you join an organization, then you're saying that you're gonna be committed to that organization and the things that they want to do. So I would say maybe somebody starting out who are kind of unsure about whether they want to be a part of an organization or not, just find something that you like and go volunteer with that place. And then maybe once you see how they operate, man, then maybe you'll say, okay, you know what, I want to join an organization. But like I was saying, the internet, you can Google all this stuff and it'll tell you basically all the organizations in your surrounding area, and then you go to those organizations website and you see if they fit or embody the things you want to do.
Yeah, because I believe the whole premise, like I said, of this entire conversation is just the networking piece, the getting out and getting out of your shell, and sharing your viewpoint, sharing your way of thinking to the world. Like I said, what I want people to gain from this is that you are important. Your voice needs to be heard. If you are upset about change, if you're upset because things have turned to a different light, because a lot of us say, well, this not how it was back in the day, or things might be getting better, but it could get better if this happened. Well, no one knows until you expose it, until you show it, until you say something. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it could be 100 people in the room, but that one other person that comes in the room might have a totally different perspective than everybody else.
Absolutely.
You might be that person, but it's not beneficial just to complain with no solutions.
We got a lot of them people too, unfortunately, that man, it's always never the way they want. But we gotta realize it's never gonna be the way one side or this person always
Yeah.
want. You gotta, we gotta adapt. You know what I'm saying? Life is a series of just becoming more adaptable to things over time.
Yeah, no, and I want to leave right there exactly, and that's ultimately what I wanted to get through to a lot of people. But once again, I want to tell you thank you for coming on, Mr. McCoy. Thank you for doing the part two with me, because I know it was just a struggle. It was, oh man, look, we're from the military, so we already know. I said it was ate up, it was all over the place, but this was so much better. Wi-Fi was on point. I got
Yeah,
the
yeah.
hotel room. We lit. We straight.
Hey man, I appreciate you for having me, brother. Man, we gotta do this again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So once again, I appreciate it, and I just want to leave the listeners and the followers and people that are live. How would they go about finding you? And then if you have any new events, any new um, platforms that you want to speak about, go ahead and let them know.
So on all right, so on my social media, so I can be found on YouTube if you just type in Marcus McCoy. My YouTube channel will pop up, which is Real Talk with Marcus McCoy. Also, if you type in Real Marcus McCoy on IG, and then Real Talk with Marcus McCoy on Facebook. I also got to make this great announcement because this is big time. I'm also now on Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts, and all you got to do is put in Real Talk with Marcus McCoy. Um, right now, different things coming up. Gonna be doing some traveling, both professionally and personally. But I want you guys to tune in because I'm gonna have some new shows coming up, different topics. My man, Mr. Clark, he's definitely gonna be on there. We gotta lock him in because
Yes,
he's
yes.
definitely a gem. But just look forward to the things we got going in the future. Um, just stay tuned.
I appreciate it. Once again, thank you so much. Hopefully, we can do a part two, because I definitely want to stay in tune with you. Definitely want to understand what's coming up, especially in El Paso for anybody who's local. Um, you know, I just definitely want to be a resource. And if there's anything that you need, definitely let me know.
I appreciate it. Likewise, my brother.
Thank you.